Hello and welcome to another Back to Jerusalem podcast. I'm Eugene Bach, your host for this time, and I'm coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of America this time. I was just at a funeral, sadly, with my good friend Miriam Ibrahim. Her husband passed away, and so I accompanied her and her children to the funeral. And as I'm at the funeral, there has been a lot of development in Iran. And I've had quite a number of people that have actually written to me saying that it's interesting that there's a silence about the situation in Iran from the same crowd as the Free Palestine movement. And the people that chanted for Free Palestine are oddly silent during this movement for the people to gain freedom in Iran. It's one of the things that we've seen. If anybody's been paying attention at all, I mean, I've even seen memes pop up that have suddenly kind of noticed how the notorious Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who was often so loud and open and making these big media splashes about going in and helping the Palestinians, is suddenly silent during one of the largest freedom movements in the world. Why? Why is that? During this podcast, what I want to do is I want to share with you three main reasons that you're not going to hear anywhere else about why there is a silence from the Free Palestinian crowd as it relates to what is taking place right now in Iran. Right now in Iran, people are dying by the hundreds, giving their lives in hopes that they can break free from the tyrannical Islamic regime that currently controls and rules over Iran with an iron fist. And there are three main reasons why you will not hear a peep from the Free Palestinian crowd. First, and this is not just something that's kind of because I'm a Christian, but even if you're not a Christian, the first main reason, the primary reason behind it all is spiritual. Now, I know that that's not an argument that you might be able to make on CNN or BBC. It would feel odd sitting in a forum with people that don't think about spirits to say that the connection between the Free Palestinian crowd and the pro-Ayatollah crowd is a spiritual one. Yes, the Free Palestinian movement is confusing. Why? Because, at least in the West, it's often associated with protesters, and you know this as well as I do, that support a militant version of LGBTQ. They have a Marxist ideology, which the reason why that's important is because Marxist ideologies are atheist. It's atheistic in nature. I mean, Karl Marx said that religion is the opiate of the masses. And every communist party in the world, doesn't matter whether it's Russia, China, North Korea, Cuba, when you become a member of the Communist Party, you become a verified atheist. That's a part of joining the party. So you have a militant LGBTQ group that have a Marxist ideology and gender dysphoria. At first glance, when you see that, you think that all of these attributes are diametrically opposed to the extreme form of Islam. I mean, Islam will kill homosexuals and anybody a part of the LGBTQ community. They will absolutely slaughter those that have gender dysphoria, that are men that dress up like women, and vice versa. They are not atheistic in nature. They're the exact opposite of being atheistic in nature. So at first glance, all of these attributes of the Free Palestinian movement, at least as it is seen in the West, is completely on the opposite side of the spectrum from the Islam that is practiced in Palestine, or practiced in Iran for that matter. But on a closer look, these two opposing movements have a common spiritual element. And when you understand that spiritual element, it brings everything into better focus. You see, the Free Palestinian movement is not for freedom. They're not for democracy. They're not for human rights or any of the other things that they claim when they're chanting in the streets. That's why they don't care about the slaughter that is taking place in Iran. They're not for those things. They are for one thing, and that is power. More specifically, spiritual power. Why do I say spiritual power? Because you will notice a commonality between these two, and that is an antichrist spirit. An antichrist spirit is at the root of this unholy alliance, and it is why the militant LGBTQ movements are together with radical Islam as one. Though they believe completely different things, they are of the same spirit, which is the Antichrist spirit. Now, I know that that is not going to be an argument that will go over well in cocktail parties. I'm aware of that. But as you dig deeper, that's the number one thing. But there are two other reasons that will actually stand up in any kind of forum, but they're not being talked about. The next is that a more practical reason is that both Palestine and Iran are historically connected. One cannot advocate for the people of Iran if they're looking to shake off the shackles of the same slave master that looks to enslave the Palestinians. The Free Palestine movement, though they paint themselves as a group that stands for decolonization and human rights, guys, that is far from the truth. Iran is occupied by arguably the largest imperialist in the world today, and they're not making a peep. What is not talked about is that Islam is the number one colonizer in the world today. Almost a third of the world's population is colonized by Islam. You know, as Islam spread out in the 7th century from the Arabic Peninsula, it went in every direction, conquering, raping, pillaging, and enslaving nations, people groups, ethnic groups. Today, I can go to Sudan in Africa. You know what language they speak? Arabic. You know what religion they follow? Arabic. And if they leave that religion, they are killed. That's why I wrote the book Shackled about Miriam Ibrahim, the woman that I just went to the funeral of her husband with. She was put on death row. Why? Because she dared to accept Christ as her Lord and Savior in a Muslim country. As an African, her native language is not Arabic, but she speaks Arabic. Why? Because she's forced to from birth by the colonialists, the imperialists, the Muslims. Same in Egypt. Egyptians are ethnically Arabic, but today they're Egyptians are ethnically African, but today they are Arabic. Why? Because they were colonized. Guys, this isn't talked about anywhere. You think the Constantinople, the capital of Turkey today, known as Istanbul, willingly became Muslims, gave their life to Allah of their own free will? No. It was one of the most gruesome events in human history, barbaric conquering of the nation of what is modern day Turkey, a raid into Constantinople, raping of the women, slaughtering of the men, enslavement of the children, and Christianity wiped out for the most part. That happened everywhere Islam went. They did that in the Levant, which is modern day Israel. Now, a lot of people will say, well, no, Palestine has always been ethnically Palestinian. Do you even know what the word Palestine means? Look it up. Palestine is a Romanized word that means land of the Philistines. That's right. The same person that came from, or the people group that the person Goliath came from, that you read about in the Bible. Remember David and Goliath? He was a Philistine. The Philistinians, or the Philistines, or however you call that people group, they were the arch enemy of the Jews. And so when the Jews ticked off the Romans with their rebellion against the Roman Empire during the days of the Maccabees, when they ticked off the Romans and then again tried to raise up this rebellion from within against the Roman Empire destroyed everything of the Jews, and the Jews were scattered all over the face of the earth. And they called the land Palestine as a derogatory term against the Jews, to say that we will call this land of the Philistines, your arch enemy, so that forever it will be known not as Israel, but as the land of your enemy. That was a punishment from the Romans to the Jews. But even if you believe that that today's Palestinians are the Philistines, you can look in the Bible, you can look in the ancient writings of the Egyptians, and you can look at the DNA of the Philistines. The DNA of the Philistines, as well as the writings from the Egyptians, because they raided Egypt before the Levant. And they have their own writings about, so you can see the hieroglyphics about the battles between the Egyptians and the Philistines. And then the biblical writings of the Philistines. It was clear that the Philistines were not from the Levant. They were not Jews. They were not Arabs. According to the writings of the Egyptians, the writings of the Jews, and the DNA, they were Southern European, most likely from the southern islands of Greece known as the Cretan Islands. However, the modern day Palestine, the land of Palestine today in modern times is the result of a land that was invaded by those same Arab Muslims that wanted to colonize the area. And they did. When they colonized it, they gave it its religion, they gave it its people, and they gave it its language. This is the same fate that was shared by the Persians. Persia was not a Muslim country, but like the Levant, they were invaded by Arabs, raped, pillaged, killed, and the people were forced to accept Islam and speak the Arabic language. So today, it doesn't matter whether you are in Egypt, Morocco, Sudan, Iran. When you read the Quran, you read it in Arabic. If you're in Dearborn, Michigan, and you listen to the prayers coming out from the speakers, they are in Arabic. This is a colonizing religion, the largest one in the world. When Christians go in as missionaries, they translate the Bible into the local language. They adopt many of the local customs as long as they are not against the Bible. They actually enhance the DNA of the people. That hasn't always been the case. It depends on which historical period you're looking at, but that is the heartbeat of every Christian. Definitely the heartbeat of the first century church, and definitely the heartbeat of the underground church of the Chinese that are sent out in the Back to Jerusalem vision into the areas between China and Jerusalem. They focus on adopting the local language, learning the local language, following the local customs, dressing like the indigenous people, enhancing that, because we don't look the same when we're born, we don't look the same when we're born again. The missionaries from China pray in the language of the people that they're preaching to, they're reaching, not the Arabs, not the Muslims, not Islamic imperialists. Islamic imperialists demand, and this is true in Palestine and is true in Iran. And it is that historical connection that brings them together that makes it absolutely impossible for those that chant for a free Palestine to also chant for a free Iran. Why? Because Palestine is not enslaved. Iran is. Iran is already at the destination that the protesters are chanting for. Palestine is not. Those that chant are chanting from the river to the sea. The idea is that it's not just the area that currently belongs to the Palestinian people, but it is all of Israel, including Jerusalem. This is essential for the enemy. Goes back to the very first item that I pointed to, which is that spiritual connection, that antichrist connection. The Jews cannot exist with that antichrist spirit. The antichrist spirit demands the annihilation of the Jews. Why? Because the fulfillment of the end times includes prophecy of the Jewish people coming into their own right before the Father. So in order to keep that from happening, it's the same exact tactic that we see employed against Christ himself. Throughout history, we see that the enemy has always tried to destroy the Jewish people. The Old Testament is the enemies of God trying to destroy the Jewish people. Why? To stop the birth of the Savior. So when we see the genocide that was supposed to take place during the days of Esther, that genocide was supposed to happen so that Mary, the tribe of Judah, would never give birth to the Savior, that the fulfillment of the prophecy of God would never come to pass. Now, after Jesus, there is a promise of his return. That promise of his return includes in the last days the Jewish people coming to him. In order for that to not happen, the enemy is trying to annihilate the Jewish people altogether. Thus, the chants from the river to the sea. And when you look at the historical connection of enslavement, there is a connection between where Iran is at today and where the pro or the Free Palestine movement would like Palestine to be today as well. Because of Israel, the Palestinian areas are not enslaved, not to the spirit of the enemy. To be completely enslaved, all of Israel needs to be under Islamic control. And so even though Iran and Palestine might be two different areas, two different religions, and when I say different religions, I mean there is a big war that takes place between the Shia and the Sunni. And a lot of people will point that out. What they will say is that, guys, no one hates the Sunnis more than the Shia. No one hates the Shia more than the Sunni. They don't come together for anything. Yes, they do. Why? Because they're of the same spirit. That is why the very people that would be slaughtered in a Muslim nation, the LGBTQ movement, the very people that would be slaughtered are out fighting in the streets, screaming at the top of their lungs for a free Palestine. And yet they are silent on Iran. Why? Because where Iran is at today is where they want all of Israel to be. So there's a historical connection between the two. But more than anything, Number 3, Iran and Palestine are connected financially, politically, and militarily. So the Free Palestine movement can't go against the current regime in Iran because the current regime in Iran is financially, politically, and militarily connected, married to Palestine. Iran funds Hamas. The people that started the war in Gaza were partially funded by the Iranian regime. In like manner, and this is something that most people don't know, if you've forgotten everything else about this podcast, this is probably the most important. In like manner, it was the Palestinians that started the Islamic Republic of Iran by supporting the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Now, I'm going to read a few portions of a book that I helped write together with a guy by the name of Brother Abdull. The book is called Jihad the Day I Died. Brother Abdull was born and raised by an Ayatollah in Iran. Brother Abdull was there on the streets in Tehran when the revolution took place in 1979. The theocratic Islamic dictator that we see in Iran today was partially seated by the Palestinians, financially supported by the Palestinians, and even trained by the Palestinians. If I can just really quick go through and read from excerpts from this book, Brother Abdull paints out a picture that is better than anything that I could have done. Because it was the Palestinians who helped support Iran, and Iran helped support the Palestinians. In fact, today, Iran provides substantial funding to Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups. According to current estimates, the annual amount that Iran supplies to these terrorist groups in Palestine is about $100 million a year. That money's primarily through Iran's oil programs. And military aid and training. Iran supplied Hamas with weapons and technology to manufacture its own weapons, and they helped them make rockets with increasing range and sophistication. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard has helped provide training and logistical help for Hamas, including, and this is a biggie, expertise in tunnel warfare. That has been the absolute centerpiece of the warfare in Gaza, has been the tunnel warfare. That was mainly, the architect of that was Iran and the Revolutionary Guard. They also, we see with just the assassinations, the connection. You know, the conflict that escalated last year in 2024, there was a top Hamas political leader that Israel took out by the name of Ismail Haniyeh. He was killed in July of 2024 in, drumroll, Tehran. Iran blamed Israel, of course, and they retaliated for it. We see in the regional tensions of the Middle East, you have the Israeli-Hamas war, and it has the tensions throughout all of the area, but the war is subsidized by Iranian-backed groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Hamas in Gaza. And in his book, Jihad, the Day I Died, Brother Abdull lays out things that you'll never hear anywhere else. One of the things that he points to that you won't really hear anywhere else, I never heard it until he said, I had to really go deep and start looking it up because I never heard anybody share this before. So Brother Abdull, who's a Christian who became a believer in Iran, was put on death row and was sentenced to death. He started off in the Iranian army. He was one of the youngest officers in Iranian history. And he told me that he was forbidden to shoot the protesters in 1979. He was in the streets of Tehran. He was given a weapon, but he wasn't given bullets, and he was told he was not allowed to shoot the protesters. This is what he writes. I'm going to read directly from his book. Quote, The rapidly growing mob was becoming more antagonizing by the minute, and we had no orders to tell us what to do if we were attacked other than not to shoot. The order not to shoot was an easy one to keep because no one gave me bullets for my service rifle anyway, but I was wishing they had. I could hear gunfire from a nearby street. Someone had ammunition, but it wasn't me. I felt trapped. We all did. We could hear the gunfire. We could taste the choking stench of thick black smoke rising into the dense late afternoon air. We could feel the searing heat from the American flags burning and the torched tires of someone's overturned car. I could see the rage of violence in the eyes of the young men all around me. They were angry, and they had the shouts of the bearded Islamic followers, just like the ones following my grandfather and uncle. But they were given the order not to shoot. That is completely different than the Ayatollahs of today. They are shooting and killing the protesters by the hundreds, and not anybody on the Free Palestinian side is whispering a peep. Brother Abdull goes on to talk about his situation. He says, in fact, it was under the Shah's direct command that I was given the order not to shoot any protesters. It was a direct order from him that I was not allowed to have any ammunition for my weapon. I understood the idea in theory, but in practice, standing there vulnerable on the street in the heat of the protest made me desperately desire bullets. The protesters didn't know that my rifle was empty. They didn't care. They were growing more aggressive, and they could see we were not responding. You see, because they could see that the military was not attacking them, it made them more brave, more daring, more aggressive. So if the soldiers were not killing protesters in 1979 riots in Tehran, then who was shooting? Because protesters were being shot. People were being killed. During the protest of 1979, there were protesters that were shot and killed. Brother Abdull also gives us firsthand experience about this as well. He shares this, quote, during our training, we were briefed about the Iranian rebels who were training in Lebanon with the Palestinians. Get that. I'm going to say it again because this is so important to understand the nature of psychological warfare. This is PsyOps 101. He said this, quote, during our training, we were briefed about the Iranian rebels who were trained in Lebanon by the Palestinians. In 1977, U.S. intelligence assessment reported that the weapon systems that the Iranians were smuggling into the country from joint training with the Palestinians. It seemed the Palestinian snipers were shooting protesters to agitate the crowds and gain international support and sympathy for the Ayatollahs, and it worked. Guys, this is Hamas 101. Hamas 101 was allowing their own people to die. Not only allowing their own people to die, they were using women and children as shields. Why? For the same reason that Palestinian snipers were shooting protesters on the streets. They were together. They were standing in solidarity with those protesters. But if it took one or two people of your own to kill in order to do what? To gain sympathy and support for the movement. So, according to Brother Abdull, Palestinian snipers were killing pro-Ayatollah protesters so that the news would capture the deaths, air it all over the world, and gain international sympathy and support for the Ayatollahs. This is exactly what Hamas has been doing in Gaza, shooting their own people. Now, I'm not saying that Hamas picked up rifles and shot their own people as they did in Iran, but they were purposefully using women and children as shields to gain support and sympathy for their movement. Brother Abdull further noted in his book, quote, "The first person to officially be invited for a state visit to Iran after the fall of the Shah and the Ayatollahs came to power was Yasser Arafat." And Yasser Arafat declared that he was, quote, "coming to his own home," end quote, because of the aid he provided to help overthrow the Shah and put the Ayatollahs in power. You want to know why the Free Palestinian crowds are not supporting the Free Iran movement right now that is taking place? Because it is against their agenda. Iran supported Hamas just as the Free Palestinian people supported Hamas. The very deaths that were being chanted at the protests for the Free Palestinian movement was being used in the same way that they were being used during the days of the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Nothing has changed. There's a spiritual element to this, there's a historical element to this, and there's a financial, political element to this as well. So if it is confusing why there's so much silence from the Free Palestinian movement in regards to Iran, it is because the same evil that fights against Israel is the same evil that supports the tyrannical regime in power in Iran. And I hope that makes sense. I want to thank you so much for joining us for another Back to Jerusalem podcast. Again, I'm Eugene Bach, your host for this time, coming to you live on delay from somewhere within the borders of America. God bless.